Hi, this is Doug Howard, President of Growth Team Strategies, here today with another episode of Selling the Dream. And I'm here today with my co-host, Kathi Fleck. Kathi down in Texas. How are we doing today, Kathi?
I'm doing great in Texas, Doug.
Great. How the dogs doing today? They doing good?
They're good. They're at least quiet because I did not move them out of this room. So,
I mean, some episodes, the dogs have a lot to say. So I just want to say, it's okay. That's all right. That's good stuff. So today we're joined again by Scott Couchenour, who's got a really interesting business, Serving Strong.
Serving Strong. Yep.
Okay. Scott, thanks for being here with us again today and for continuing the conversation. We're excited about it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and talk with you guys.
Sure.
Again.
So Scott, I'm a bit of a history nerd, and I'm also want to just tell weird stories. So one of my favorite books, presidential books, is a book called Second Acts, right? And with each chapter, it identifies a series of presidents, one right after the other. But each chapter starts on Inauguration Day when they're actually leaving office, right? Mm-hmm. So you think about sort of a transition, a big transition, right? Imagine spending the morning as President of the United States, right? Most powerful man, Air Force One, helicopters, all this other stuff. You've been in that role for a long time, probably haven't opened a door for yourself in, quite some time. And at noon, you kind of turn into a pumpkin and go home. And I always wonder, what do they do at the end of the day? Does someone say, honey, should we order a pizza? Or that's got to be a really weird day, wouldn't you think?
Yes, right? Yes, I can imagine.
So the interesting thing, though, is so much, in that world is about what I've accomplished, my legacy, certainly identity, right? I mean, there's not too much of a stronger identity than being president of the United States. And then all of a sudden, like literally split second, someone else takes the oath of office, takes a couple minutes to read, and all of a sudden you are in a very different place. So I love the book. To me, it's really, really interesting with what people do with that next phase of their business. Now, you can tell me my strategy is a little washed up, but I'm about to turn 60 next year. And at 60, I'm going to declare a midlife crisis only because I'm testing the math to see if that means I get to live to 120. Right? And so I'm not sure this is going to work, but this is my new thing. So when you see people getting ready for transition, right? And kind of remind us a little bit about sort of what those big phases are. And then I want to talk a little bit about what are some things people need to be thinking out, maybe when they're in that 3 to 5 year window before that, to say, hey, this has got to be in my world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me give you a little context.
Sure.
I look at the average lifespan of an American male is, I believe, 78.5 years. I rounded up to 80, and I'm hoping it's more like 90, 95. I know a lot of people in their 90s, but let's go with 80. I broke that into 4 20-year segments called quarters, like 4 quarters in a football game. The first quarter is your learning quarter. You're going to school, you're being nurtured. That's your learning life. When you hit 20, you enter the second quarter, which I call the building quarter. Your 20s and your 30s, you're building your life, your career, your family, your finances, all that sort of stuff. When you reach 40, you hit the third quarter, your 40s and 50s. I call that the reaping quarter. You begin to reap, and you're kind of coming up to a cliff of sorts, and you're beginning to reap the benefits or the consequences of what you built in your second quarter. Your kids are getting a little older. Maybe they can watch themselves now, and you can go out and on a date or whatever. And then you hit your fourth quarter, which is your 60s and 70s and 80s, 90s, 100s, 120, 110. And I call that the impacting quarter. And here's my philosophy of the fourth quarter. I believe you can make more of an impact in the fourth quarter than all previous quarters combined. And for a number of reasons, but these particular. Number one, you've got a lot of knowledge. You've been around the block a few times based on experience. With that comes wisdom. You have a lot of wisdom. You won't do things that you would have done in your 20s, not because you don't have the energy, but because you've got the smarts. Why would I do that? That's not wise. The third thing is we tend to have more resources in our fourth quarter than we've ever had before, especially if you've run a well-run business and you're exiting. The fourth thing is we have a lot more time. When you exit, you're going to increase time. when you combine those four with a fifth component, and that is a sense of urgency that is born with this awareness of mortality, when you combine those four components with the sense of urgency, there are things you can do in your fourth quarter that would boggle your mind if you had a strategy, which leads me to the next point that I would make. You can choose to live by life by default, or you can live by design. The choice is up to you. Either way, it's your strategy. Yeah. If you live by default, you're just basically going through the ups and the downs, mirroring the ups and downs, trying to figure out how to go through the dark times and enjoying the good times. But after a 10-year period, you look back and say, what was it all about? On the other hand, if you were to live by design, you would be working on something that transcends the ups and downs. You would have a bigger agenda that you were working toward. That's your strategy. Yeah. Not only that, but you can leverage the down times and leverage the up times and leverage them to move yourself forward. So you're not merely going through the motions of ups and downs of life, which are one of the three things you can count on: death, taxes, and the ups and downs of life. But you've got a bigger strategy, and you're using those downs and ups to move you forward on your strategy. I get on a roll. I have no idea what the question was. So there you go.
But the answer was very compelling.
No, it was very good. This is like Jeopardy. You give us an answer like that, we'll find a question. That's no problem. That's good. That's good stuff. Kathi, what do you think about that? When you think like the 5 years before you sold and the 5 years after you've sold, like how do you contrast those and kind of put that in the context of what Scott's talking about?
It's been 2 years since I've sold, so I'm still in that. And
I know. I'm not rushing your process there. I'm just saying as you start thinking about those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the 5 years before, I was very intent on working on the business and building the strategies and the processes and that, making sure things were all flowing well. There was a lot of emphasis on that. Not so much emphasis on my own personal desires, although I was starting to pull some of those back in. I still traveled, still did some personal things, but a lot of effort was put on work. I think I had a different plan for the outcome, but you never know where that's gonna take you. But I think now I love the idea of designing it. I'm really not a default person, so I know I'm to be here where I'm at. I have some family here. I am traveling and I'm doing things that I want. So I think I think that's really good information. And I think that I was kind of aligning myself to what you were talking about, Scott, to design it. I'm more interested in learning more, but I agree with those 4 stages of life. I think those are I could kind of see myself going through those 4 stages and relate to it.
Yeah. Well, and I can speak to the fact that it's fun to have worked with Kathi as a client. It's even more fun to work with Kathi as a colleague and see all of what she's imparting to the people that we work with. That's really kind of cool. Kathi also wrote a book about the design process in remodeling. And so she's been things by design for a long time, right? That's kind of, and she might be slightly quick to point out when I am lacking in design and structure, which is very helpful. And particularly when I get on a tirade and, as she likes to say, cry about things. And so she keeps me honest, Scott, right? So, but it's interesting for me because one of the things that I've experienced, I had accounting practice for 17 years, didn't really love that business. It was kind of an evolution of good opportunities and raising a family and all that. And when I sold it, I went to work for somebody else. It was a great opportunity, but I wasn't designed to work for somebody else. And they certainly agreed with that. Now they're one of my biggest clients or they're working with them. But the interesting thing is it's been what, Kathi, 17, 18 months since we really re-ramped up this company. And, we've been able to do that in less than 2 years, much more quickly than the growth I was exhibiting in the last 3 or 4 years of a company that had been around for quite some time and that had a lot of infrastructure. So I think you're right. I mean, like you know how to move more adeptly through things and what things sound good, but just really aren't going to be that good. But one of the things that I've experienced, Scott, and I don't know where this would fall into your framework, is a lack of competition, right? When you're earlier on in your career, right, you're competing with other people in a company. You start a new company, there's competing organizations, there's awards, there's like a lot of competitive measures. And not that competition's always the driver, but I think for some people it is, right? So I'm watching the US Open tennis last night, and I'm watching, somebody that wins the first set and then like just barely loses the second set and then really comes back and gets their head together and comes on strong. And I said to my wife, I said, you know what I'm lacking right now? It's not opportunity. It's not energy. I'm lacking competition, right? Until Kathi came along, I was employee of the month every single month, right? I had nobody to compete with, right? So, and then when you look at it and you go like, okay, but that's something that always drove me. And if I can't find that in what I'm doing, and whether it was in this business or on a pickleball court, which I haven't played yet, but I bought a paddle, so I'm feeling pretty excited about that, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like, do you ever find that like the thing that drives you, if that piece, whatever it is, whether it's camaraderie with other people or learning new things, when that's the piece that's going to be maybe lacking a little bit, that has a more profound effect.
What you're referring to is identity.
Okay.
And part of your identity is a set of core values. And what you've just described for yourself is what I would call the thrill of the hunt and the beating of others. The competitive nature is a thread that has to weave itself into your second act. What are you going to be doing? Well, whatever it's going to be, it has to honor that value. Now, for you, it might be pickleball. That might be something that gives you that satisfaction. But here's the point. Your identity is your career, or whatever you do after you've sold the business. That is an expression of your identity. Mm. This is the key thing that I struggled with the most in losing our business, having to close our 44-year-old family business, was that loss of identity. I didn't know who I was because I'd attached my identity to my career. And when the career was gone, which it tends to do, I mean, in my case, it was unplanned. Business owners planning their exit, they're planning for a career to end. It's going to have a finality to it. Yeah. So the term exit itself has a tone of finality to it. But what has been so helpful to me when I realized this, and to my clients, it's amazing. You almost see it on their faces when they grasp hold of this concept that the identity can still be intact, but your career is an expression of that identity. They're separate, which means your career can change. You could be 30, 40 years in a competitive nature in a career, exit that, and find a similar expression of that competitive nature in pickleball. And it sounds like, how can you compare a 30, 40-year career with pickleball? Well, it's not as far-fetched as you might think, because what you're doing underneath all this is you're honoring your values. You are fulfilling the appropriate expression of who you are. It may not be pickleball. Maybe it's some other, you become a board chair of a nonprofit that does XYZ and there's a competitive nature. Whatever it is, remember that your identity is, and what you do is the experience or the expression. It's what others experience of you that is your identity. And when you lose your career, or when you exit your career, you don't exit your identity. You take you everywhere you go. Yeah. So one of the first things we do when I work with clients is let's uncover who you are. Who is it that you are?
Yeah.
And then we can strategize going forward.
See, Scott, when I was younger, I used to say, I think it's a great privilege I get to spend all day with me. And now I kind of feel sometimes like it'd be nice to leave me behind for a couple hours, because I can be a little bit much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you say, Kath? Yeah. So, Kathi, where do you think this figures into some of the conversations we're having with folks? Like where along their journey, the conversations that we're having, does it seem likely to say, you know what, this is a piece, this is something you need to learn. We need to connect you with Scott. Like, how do you feel like these worlds connect?
Yeah, I was thinking about a friend that I was talking to who, you know, too, Doug, who is wanting to retire, but said to me recently, I don't know what I would do. Everything I do is centered around remodeling, and this is my world. But yet I do want to retire in maybe 3 years or so. I think having a conversation with Scott and understanding the process, and Scott, you're very good at picking up on where people are and what their needs are. Very quickly, you can intuitively pick that up from a conversation. So I think that's so helpful, even in an initial conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
So I think of some of the people that we're coaching who are thinking of retiring, or we have some young ones in their 30s or maybe early 40s who are brave enough to start the coaching process. I don't know where they fit in the picture, but I think letting them know that these are opportunities so they can retire or go on. But I think about a client that I had in remodeling who he and his wife had a public relations company and worked for one of the major airlines. And at some point they sold the business, but the company hired the wife. And so we're remodeling the house, and this poor man was kind of stranded without a mast or a sailboat or anything. And so he's introducing himself to my trades as the CEO of his home. And so the poor guy, he would take my trades aside and kind of inundate them with all his knowledge, and he would involve himself in all the remodeling process. I didn't really connect with it at the time because I was so focused on the remodel, whole house remodel and all this stuff. You know, he's critiquing my contract. He's telling me how I'm supposed to be doing stuff. But where he was is he had lost his identity, and his wife was continuing on and was a breadwinner. And so somebody like that probably would have benefited so much from having coached with you. So that I just think that's very needed, and people don't necessarily look at it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, I know we're a little tight on time today. I'd love to have you back and explore more of some of these individual pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'd like to look for, we do a lot of outreach and speaking and things like that about succession planning. Maybe some opportunities to coordinate on that, or maybe sing a duet one day or something.
Well, we'll have to audition first, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. No,
I can't sing.
I'll be Sunny. You can be Cher. You can have the,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So tell people how to get in touch with you. How do they find you?
Just go to servingstrong.com. Best thing I can say is click the join button. And I make it a core value of mine to be one of the most important and valuable resources to hit your inbox, because we get a lot of stuff and a lot of junk, and I take that very seriously. So that would be the main thing. If you want to just make a direct connection, coach@servingstrong.com.
All right. Scott, thanks so much for being here. This was great. Kathi, always a pleasure, always fun to hang out and share some thoughts. I'm Doug Howard, Selling the Dream, and we'll be back in another week.
Thank you for listening to the Selling the Dream podcast, starring Doug Howard and Kathi Fleck. Both Doug and Kathi have built and sold successful businesses and hope this podcast will help other small business owners do the same. Tune in every week to hear more tips for increasing the value of your company so you get the highest return for your years of hard work when it comes time to sell or transition your business. Can't wait till next week? Check out our website for more information at www.growththemes.com.